Hello, everyone. Welcome to our daily meditation live stream. I'm Zainab, and I'm very happy to be here connecting with you and practicing with you. Our topic today is wise and loving speech. This was a request by one of the people in the community who have been doing these live streams along with us. And the question she asked was, how can I pause before I say things that I know are going to be hurtful or harmful to myself or to another person? And wise and loving speech actually is a big part of mindfulness practice. So this is what we will explore today together. As always, I will share a little bit of guidance, and then we will do a meditation that's about 10 minutes long. So I want to start by this quote by Tony Bernhardt, who says, many of the actions that can cause the greatest suffering or bring about the greatest benefit in our lives are centered on one part of the body, the mouth. I really loved the sense of humor and the lightness in that. And I think this pain is something we can all relate to. That there were times when we said something we wish we hadn't said, or we thought what we said was wonderful, but it had an impact on the other person that we did not foresee. And in Buddhism, there is a guidance given for wise speech by the Buddha himself that I find to be the perfect summary of what is exactly wise and loving speech. So basically, it has three components. The Buddha says that what we say when you speak, what you say is true, it's kind, and it's helpful. And other various teachers, senior teachers in mindfulness, have added a fourth component to that, which is time. That what we say is timely, or it's the right time to say it. And I will now give a little bit of guidance on each four of these separately. And I do think that when they come together, that what we say is true, it's kind, it's helpful, and it's timely, is just a wonderful summary of what is wise speech. So let's start with the first one, true. There is sometimes a misunderstanding that wise and loving speech is the speech where we only talk about rainbows and butterflies. And we all understand that sometimes some things are very hard to say. They are hard to say either because they're difficult to hear, or we don't know how to formulate them, or it's a piece of truth that we feel we need to share, but we don't know how it will land. And therefore, wise and loving speech takes a good amount of courage and integrity. And wise and loving speech, therefore, is not just speech that's easy and loving. It can sometimes be quite difficult, actually. Poet Adrienne Rich says, an honorable human relationship, that is one in which two people have the right to use the word love, is a process of deepening the truths they can tell each other. It is important to do this because it breaks down human self-delusion and isolation. I really love this idea of, in our loving bonds with other people, we can deepen the truths we tell each other. And that this process, which takes time, it takes practice, it takes courage, integrity, and trust, this process will help us get rid of our delusions, and it will help us connect. And integrity is something I personally have cared about, a value I really care about. And the other week, I came across a beautiful definition of integrity by Larry Yang, very alternative definitions, multiple definitions of integrity and what it is. And I would like to share with you three of them. So Larry Yang says, Integrity is walking the highest path, even if it is painful and arduous and long. Integrity is being kind when everyone and everything around you is not kind. Integrity is loving when you do not feel loved yourself. So I think we can all sense the hardship or the challenge in doing that, being kind when the other is not kind, being loving when the other is not loving, and taking this highest path, even though it is painful and arduous and sometimes very long. Now, on to the second component, which is kindness. So wise and loving speech is also a speech that is kind. And here I would like to share 3 things that can help us find that kindness. The first one is mindfulness of emotions. This is what we were practicing a few days ago, so you can go back to that video on YouTube and practice it a few more times. The idea is that our emotions can be very difficult to sit with when we feel a lot of anger and that anger feels explosive. That might be a moment where we find it hard to tolerate that emotion. And so we need to understand the window of tolerance, our window of tolerance expands over time as we practice mindfulness more. That anger that maybe we were not able to tolerate a year ago, through constant practice, might become something that we are able to tolerate. And tolerating our own difficult emotions, taking responsibility for them, caring for them, the way Thich Nhat Hanh says, is an important integral part of wise and loving speech, because when we are able to tolerate our emotions, we sit with them first, we find some calm, we find some space, some new perspective, and then we come to the speech with that newfound perspective or newfound calm. And the second thing to remember for the kindness aspect is interconnectedness. So there is a lot of training, communication training, where we understand that we need to use the word I rather than you, so that we don't start the sentence saying you did X, Y, Z, and we talk about I, me, mine. So my feelings, what I observed, what I felt. And for that, actually, I would recommend a beautiful book called Nonviolent Communication by Marshall Rosenberg. So this book is one of the books that really changed my life. It gives a very simple to use framework for communication. And in this, Marshall Rosenberg says that when we say something, we can use the 4 parts of what I observed, what I felt, what I needed, and what I'm asking the other person to do. And one way of taking this idea even further is to notice in communication how we so often use I, me, mine. And actually an angle that can help us find a bit more kindness is the angle of we. So when there is a moment of conflict or tension in a relationship, instead of saying, I am angry, is it possible for us to notice we are angry? And often because of limbic resonance, if there is one person who's angry, the others are angry as well. So we have this understanding that emotions are contagious. So when there is a moment of difficulty, how can we pause and say, okay, we are angry right now. We are sad right now. This is difficult for us right now. And can we open the communication channel with that interconnectedness, with that realization of the togetherness, rather than this constant focus we have in our culture, especially in the West, of I, me, and mine. And the other thing to add here is compassion. And this is again in both directions. So compassion for yourself, remembering that this is difficult for you. This moment of being wise and loving speech means that there's something going on that is difficult for you. And putting a hand on your heart and saying, this is difficult. And this is normal. It's normal that it's difficult. I'm human. This is human. And may I be kind to myself? May I have a sense of opening? May I find some space in this? May I be held in love? So whatever phrases or things help you find a sense of kindness toward yourself. And then practicing the same compassion for the other, remembering that you are both suffering. And so extending maybe compassionate breathing for the other person, breathing in their suffering and breathing them out, peace and joy, which was another practice we did a few days ago. So you can find the compassionate breathing video on YouTube. And then the final thing to remember here is not to get caught up in perfectionism. Larry Yang says his aspirations are, may I be as loving in this moment as possible. If I cannot be loving in this moment, may I be kind. If I cannot be kind, may I be non-judgmental. If I cannot be non-judgmental, may I not cause harm. And if I cannot not cause harm, may I cause the least amount of harm possible. So kind of checking the expectations we have from ourselves either, and understanding that loving may not always be possible. Sometimes the wise speech may be not talking, taking a few hours of a break to ensure that you do not cause harm. And the third idea of making sure that your speech is helpful, I think it's a big part of wise and loving speech, because you come from this understanding that there is a difficulty and both parties need help in this moment. And sometimes we put ourselves in funny situations, in situations that are not so helpful. I saw this New Yorker magazine cartoon the other day. So it's a woman and a man standing inside a living room, and the woman is holding a vacuum and saying to the man, I'm going to be vacuuming if you want to go to the farthest room and start asking me questions. So this, you might relate to this, where you're vacuuming or you're doing something, or there's a lot of noise and someone is talking to you and it feels really distant, or you don't really understand what they're saying. So helpfulness is, I think, partly setting the right conditions, and then also using a few tools or techniques or resources that can bring a little bit more help and ease for the communication to happen a bit more smoothly. Thich Nhat Hanh, for example, he advises a peace treaty where when you are angry, you first take some time for yourself, and then you go to the other person and you say, I am angry and I want you to know it. I am doing my best. Please help me. And he says, if you can bring yourself to say these three things, I am angry and I want you to know it. I'm doing my best. Please help me. You will already feel connected, and it will already be a moment of helpfulness, both for you to express to the other person that you need help and to ask for help, and for the other person to then have that kind heart of understanding that you need help in that moment of anger. And two other little ideas from this book, Nonviolent Communication. The first one is paraphrasing. So when someone is talking to you, paraphrasing what you just heard them say, giving it back to them so you understand 100%, you're sure that you heard them correctly, or you got the meaning of what they wanted to say correctly. And on the other side of this, when you talk and when you are saying something maybe difficult to someone, at the end of your speech, you can just add this little magic sentence, and you can say to them, can you just tell me what you heard me say? Can you repeat to me what you just heard me say? And make sure that the meaning of what you are trying to say landed the way you wanted to land. So I could go on and on, but there are these many little techniques or tools, or setting up the right environment for that speech are all parts of wise speech. And the last one is time. So a big part of time is going slow. As Tara Brach says, if we go half as fast, we will notice twice as much. And I love this little poem by Kobayashi Isa, who says, climb Mount Fuji, O snail, but slowly, slowly. So fast, talking fast, acting fast, being fast is a huge part of our cultural conditioning. And a big part of wise speech is the ability to slow down, because then we can notice more what's happening in us and in the other. And the trick here is not to slow down too much or not to wait too long. Thich Nhat Hanh, for example, recommends a 24-hour period where you take a full day to calm down, to process your emotions, and you go to the person without waiting too long before the emotions or the thoughts settle and really get locked in. You want to give it a chance to air out and for there to be mutual understanding, because most of the time these little moments of tension or difficulty happen because of our own misperceptions or misinformation. And the other thing to remember is pausing. I love this quote by Suzuki Roshi, who says the most important thing is to remember the most important thing. So the trick here is to remember the pause, and to do it as often as you can in the middle of your sentence, one little pause after one sentence, or taking a few deep breaths here and there, really kind of letting there be a little bit of silence in the middle of the speech and noticing how that serves and what it does. Because those moments of silence and pausing can really be moments for us to set intentions, to ask ourselves, what is my heart's deepest longing right now? What am I really wanting in this moment? And the last thing to share before we start this practice is this is a practice. So just like playing the piano, just like learning to speak a new language, wise and loving speech is something we practice and practice and practice, and we see the changes in ourselves over time. So patience is really key. So let's practice now. I will invite you to find a posture in which you feel awake and relaxed. This can be a posture in which you are sitting or standing or lying down. And when you are ready, you can close your eyes or lower your gaze. And we will begin by taking a few deep breaths, slowing down the inhale and slowing down the exhale. Taking a pause with the body to relax and to find a kind and simple presence. And collecting the scattered attention on your breath or on your anchor. And now as we begin this brief meditation, bringing to mind a difficulty you had recently with regards to speech or wise speech. This could be a moment where you said something you didn't want to say, or something you said was not so helpful, or there was some impact of some kind. There was a little bit of an emotional entanglement in your speech. And making sure that you don't pick something that is going to be overwhelming. So picking something that is a 4 or 5 on a scale. And you might remember this situation, this moment with this person, and kind of play it out like a movie in your head, and pause the movie when you start the emotions kind of bubbling up. And as we begin this investigation, this gentle investigation, you might first name the emotions, what the emotions are. There might be some anger, frustration, sadness. You might locate these emotions in your body and sense how they are expressed inside the body, with which sensations, and if they are changing or if they are stable. And you might say to these difficult emotions, "Come, anger, I will take care of you." So inviting them in with a sense of tenderness and care. And you might also tap into some self-compassion by putting a hand on your belly or on your heart and saying, "This is difficult for me," or "This was difficult for me." You might remind yourself that it takes time to tolerate our difficult emotions. It takes practice. You might remind yourself that it's normal and human to be challenged and to be struggling. And you might then say something kind to yourself, like, "May I find ease in this moment. May I find ease and love and space in this relationship." And you might also remember specifically something you said or something you wanted to say. And then you might ask yourself, is this true? There might be a sense that it isn't true, or it's not always true, or it is true and this feels difficult. Remembering that integrity can be arduous and painful. And you might also open yourself up to kindness in your speech by reminding yourself of the interconnectedness, noticing the space between you and the other, this loving bond. You might notice if the other is struggling as well. And you might notice what it's like to rest in this space of togetherness, in this common struggle. Maybe breathing in the difficult emotions in both yourself and the other person, and then breathing out for both of you peace and love and joy. And then you might sense, what could you say? What would you rather say that would be a little bit more helpful? And as you consider what you could say, you could also take into account time. So saying it slowly, the time in which you say it, remembering this image of the snail that climbs Mount Fuji slowly, without rushing, with care. You might picture what you would like to say to this person that is the truest expression of your heart. That will be helpful to you and to them. And that will help you connect. And now for the last moments of this practice, you might simply pause, rest in this space until you hear a bell. So that concludes our practice for today. Thank you so much for your practice, for being here together. I hope this practice was of benefit to you. If it was, please help us reach to more people by sharing it or giving a thumbs up to this video. If you have any questions or comments about wise and loving speech, please feel free to leave them down below the video, and I will do my best to get back to your questions and comments. And we will meet tomorrow at the same time, 7:30 p.m. Paris time, for another practice that I hope will be of benefit. The topic will be concerns about the future and anxiety and how to relate to them with mindfulness and with care. So be well, take care, and see you tomorrow.